All right, I'm going to get started. Today's group soup topic, manage and challenge and addictive behaviors in substance abuse residential treatment. Is that like accurate to say this is something that it would be a good skill to have? Does anybody disagree with that? Do we, you don't think so? You shook your head no. I thought you were saying no. I know you weren't though, because we see some challenging things, do we not? Yes. All right, so I want to do this one because it's kind of about the system, but more on the why and the how to think about it, if that makes sense. I will full disclosure, in no way am I like a ABA, BCBA, I think they're called, board certified behavioral analysis. But in my studies, I did take a big focus on behaviorism. I think I've shared with some of you, my oldest is special needs, so we kind of lived it for a while. I never really thought that I would need it in my professional practice, but then after getting involved with the residential programs, yes, it comes in handy. And I think a lot about that and the why that is. And I think it's because we're, especially in the higher levels, like inpatient A20s, we're meeting the client where they're at, but that's also involving a lot of impulse, a lot of survival mode, a lot of like just not a lot of the cognitive part of CBT, just the be, you know what I mean, going on. And I think there is something to not only does managing those things kind of also make our days a little bit easier and gives us some tools to kind of deal with common things we see, but I also think that's why they're here. I mean, the criteria for the 820 specifically is like difficulty with emotional stabilization and behaviors go along with difficulty in interpersonal relationships, which usually is about because they burned a lot of bridges with all the shit they pulled. So families had enough, and it's not the same shit, but it is, you know, just like we call it staff splitting, but that manipulation is the same as one of our clients that has run up a huge tab with all their family members borrowing money. And you know what I'm saying? Like there's similarities. So treating those just makes sense to me. I did start out with some research to support. I mean, there's tons of it. There's tons of it in our field with contingency management, especially with stimulant use disorders. Like this kind of stuff is really shown to have a positive like effect. I'm just doing that because I want to look like the research supports it. But I think any of us that kind of, I know we all have different education levels, so we didn't all go to college, but any of us did. I'm sure that you have come across some kind of research or learned something in classes where it kind of fits the setting. Do I think a strict behavioral approach in outpatient would be the move? I really don't. There is tricks they can use with it too. I mean, gift cards and things like that have been in the past to kind of increase retention rates and attendance. That's part of this. But what we do is a little more systematic, and it's a little more about recording patterns and looking for common themes or looking for a complete disregard to everything and every rule, and because all those say different things. And I think when they're thinking about behaviorism, that's the most important part. So like, I think just because, like I said, my personal experience, having lived life for years, thinking about like what motivates that behavior, where's that behavior come from, is the person seeking from exhibiting that behavior, or what triggered the behavior? Because that shit's different too. Behavior is resulting in a goal-oriented way where I'm trying to get something. They're going to be a lot different than a behavior that might, the environment triggers off me, for instance, and I flip the hell out because it stirred up some shit in me, you know what I mean? But either way, there's something to a motivation behind that behavior. I'm not going to go too much. It's just saying that the addiction is also viewed as a behavioral disease, and thus, again, if we're treating addiction, this should be part of it. I would make the argument for. I'm going to move you guys because I can't see all this. All right. Well, I felt important to provide research reference that shows the behavior. Anyone who has worked in our field understands the behavioral component of addiction. Each one of us at some point has used the term addictive behaviors. Am I wrong? Is that not kind of a common thing we throw around? It's addictive behaviors. I mean, sometimes there's even groups called addictive behaviors. So it's definitely something we're working with. In our residential programs where the clients live with while receiving treatment, and these addictive behaviors are prevalent, easily observed, it is a critical part of residential treatment to treat these behaviors in a strategic and therapeutic way. As a result of this need and the overall benefits to treatment behaviors, we developed a system to monitor, record, and design specific interventions to treat them, called the Positive Behavioral Intervention and Support System, or PIPS for short. I'm going to skip the slide. Oh, no, here it is. So I first came across the PIPS on SAMHSA's website, and it was developed in a school setting, but it's definitely shown some like, what's the word I'm looking for? Some usefulness and some positive effects across multiple settings at this point. Because I would say ours is pretty damn close. Their levels are a little bit different because in the school setting, the levels are, ours are like this too. They're built to support the person based on what's going on inside the program. The only one that would be different is our level, like their level 3 is like almost an in-school suspension kind of thing. We can't do that, you know what I'm saying? So our level 3s are usually about referring elsewhere to a higher level of care. And that's another thing too, as I was putting this together. I think we need to get away from that too, because I think we always say discharge, but it is really very rare that we just discharge someone. I mean, is it common that when we have to deal with something on that level and we say, hey, it looks like you're struggling here, how about we send you back to inpatient or to Elmira Psych to get stable with mental health symptoms? The clients might not feel that, tell us to go F ourselves and then walk out the door, but we did not throw them out. We just told them something they didn't want to hear. And I mean, that's like any treatment recommendation. It's very similar to, and if anybody's worked outpatient, you work outpatient all the time, you do evals, you tell the person, hey, recommended treatment, you got to go to groups, and they say, I'm not coming back. Or they just don't answer the phone call after the first session. So it is that kind of view. I know it feels different for us because we're in it and we're dealing with it. And sometimes it's not always a peaceful thing, but I also, just because I've seen some success in some of the other programs, I push this hard because I think it's really about just us all being united and us being fair and consistent across the board. There is no, I know I've even seen some staff struggle. Like there is, when I'm looking at something from a behavioral perspective, I mean, of course, we're thinking about the person's childhood trauma. Of course, we're trying to take that whole picture in. But when we're looking at like this, none of that matters. We're looking at the behavioral specifically. It doesn't matter how I feel about the client. It doesn't matter what I think about the client. It doesn't matter the client history. We're looking at the behavior specifically and trying to realize, A, is it a problem? B, is it something we can deal with? You know what I mean? And I think I also push it so far because I believe it is something we can deal with. I mean, I as much as I think the therapeutic intervention is all that important, I think there is just a part of it that if I'm in Dansville, me, Sierra, Kelsey, both Kelseys, we're all going to call clients on the same boat. The same things happening, like it's a consistent across the board thing. It's a program expectation. It's what they're supposed to be doing. We're not going to be throwing people out or doing crazy things for any little like mishap they do. You know what I mean? That's why it's broken down into levels. Level 1s are really benign in a lot of cases. They only become a problem when the person's doing the same thing over and over and over because we want to know why. Or again, the one where they're just complete disregard to everything. It is a way to keep score so we can also make our treatment decisions objectively and not based so much on opinions and feelings around the matter, because you have this scorecard and it kind of tells you what to do with it. You know what I mean? I don't want to
One of the things I was going to say is it helps, be objective and to really look at the behaviors, because a lot of our clients, I'm sure at residentials too, but at inpatient, a lot of our clients, it's more than just the use of substances. It's about the behaviors they develop, like to protect themselves or surrounding that. So then when they come here and they're trying to stop the substances, those behaviors still exist. And some of them, they've been doing these maladaptive behaviors for years.
Yeah. They are learning coping. I mean, I think about personalities all the time because they fascinate me. I mean, personality disorders, a lot of them come with different things like different manipulations, different ways to interact with people that have been clustered into symptoms. But really the personality disorders, they kind of reflect, those are like survival mechanisms. And that's how like a person has learned to interact with their world. So ignoring it's definitely not the case. So we want our clients to be successful and we want to teach them new ways. You know what I'm saying? But like, it is a challenging thing. And I also think there's another layer that sometimes like clients might bark and try to bluff us down to kind of evade like an expectation or demand, almost like if I throw a temper tantrum, they're not going to ask me again. And then sometimes and this is the rare case, sometimes Not so much it happens in the 820s too. I hope not in the halfway houses. We do get predators once in a while. We really do. And I think instead of trying to, as much as this, I mean, you start getting into antisocial or sociopath diagnosis. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's childhood and trauma in that too, but I don't care because I care about the 20 other clients here. It's not that I don't, and I wish that I could help that person, but we got to call that for what it is, because when we have a predator amongst our mates, then it's a different thing. And even predator, that can vary, because I think even a bully is a kind of predator. But I'm talking like we get an occasional true shit. I remember that one we had, I took him off the floor and sent him for a psych eval just because it had gotten so nuts and I needed a minute to think. But I don't know what he told them. And it was at St. James too. And they never do this with anybody. They said this dude was, they diagnosed him as a psychopath and said he was not safe to come back into that building. You know what I mean? So like we do get them on occasion. Nothing happened with that case, but I don't remember everything. He just said something in the group that freaked the whole community right out. We had to do something about that one. But I also thought I was just buying time. Turned out we were dealing with possible serial killer. You know what I mean? All right. So I'm gonna start out with the ABCs of behavior, and I'm sure some of you have heard me talk about this. Is anybody who has not heard me learn about this in school? I'm gonna start calling on people I know psych. I know, see you shaking your head. I know you got a psych degree, Barb. The ABCs of behavior. Is a model behavior modification is often used in educational and therapeutic settings with both children and adults. It stands for antecedent behavior, consequence model behavior, and it's implemented to direct or change specific behaviors by knowing what triggers the behavior and the result of the behavior. So the A stands for antecedent. That's what comes before or triggers the behavior. The B is the behavior itself, and the C is the consequence. ABC is the behavior. And the theory basically goes, if you can figure out kind of like a loose way what's driving that behavior, the B part, and figure out if it's the A or the C, sometimes both, and then kind of manipulate or change those, the desired effect, then you will essentially have luck changing the behavior. Does that, guys, make sense to you? I gave an example earlier. Actually, I'm going to use my son as the best example because that's where I'm kind of based in. A lot of his behaviors, he's self-injurious, and it comes from like he's trying to get out of demands. So if you're trying to do him task-oriented things that he don't want to, he might engage in self-injurious behaviors. I actually had to fight tooth and nail to get him in a special school in Massachusetts that goes heavy on behaviorism, because New York, as much as I love them, as much as they got some good stuff, they really don't meet his need because they don't quite get this. Because in the New York programs he was in, they would kind of always just give in and give him his way to avoid the confrontation. And I'm using this as my son, but I think this relates to how we interact with our clients too. We think it's easier to just like be like, whatever, let them get whatever they want. And I mean, sometimes we get busy and it's not that big a deal. So of course, but I'm talking the real shit, like the school he's at now, this is how I think we need to be. They're not just throwing up. They're going to take a minute and they're going to work through them, but they're going to keep that demand on him. He's going to learn how to work through that. And as a result, he's been there for years, and like the reduction has been amazing. You know what I mean? And I think that applies to almost all settings. I think that applies to parenthood. I got to be honest. If you've got kids, you know what I'm saying. If you just give the kids whatever they want all the time, it might be the easy way and everybody seems happy all the time. But what happens is we end up with spoiled little brats, you know, that don't know how to self-soothe and don't know how to take care of themselves in the world. I'm being funny, but not. The ABC model is used to understand and modify particular behaviors, which allows to be addressed and changed. Let's break down each piece of this approach. The antecedent refers to what happens to provoke or cause a behavior in question. The antecedent can be any number of things, from a particular event to an interaction with another party. I mean, so often we see there's a defense mechanism, projection. We might have another staff client, piss one off. They feel safer kind of putting that frustration on us. You know what I'm saying? That would be an antecedent. You guys get what I'm saying there? Something triggered that. Antecedents can be both negative and positive. A negative trigger leads to an unwanted behavior occurring, while a positive one can influence desired action. The behavior of interest or target behavior is what is being analyzed in each scenario. As with the antecedent, the behavior in question can be either positive or negative. The consequence is what happens to behavior because it's being analyzed. Consequences can be used to either encourage or extinguish the behavior, depending on what the behavior is desired or wanted. So if we have a client kind of throw in their ass because they want something from us. Anyway, got a good example. I want to say phone call, but that's too simple. You know what I mean? Kind of almost fucking hard. You guys have heard me say I don't negotiate with terrorists. So it's like something like that, a hard demand. And that is why I don't negotiate with terrorists, because that's how they have learned to kind of get their way. And they know it don't work all the time, but it's worked enough for them that they're going to try it. And so I'm going to change that consequence and not give in to their desired effect in that case. Sometimes I might do the opposite. I mean, obviously, if we can find a compromise or middle ground, I'm down with that too. But either way, I'm changing the consequence, because if you give in, it's dangerous. You know what I'm saying? Especially if we got a new client, we're setting a pace, you definitely want to be leery then. I mean, and that's the thing too with this, and I'm going to get into that a little bit. There are variances. I mean, the perspective is important, but how we look at it as a treatment team and how we treat it, that's where the difference comes in. We got a client's been with at 820 for 3 months doing great, and then one time throws her ass, and we can see clearly with it that they're looking for a consequence. That's one we're definitely going to try to compromise, because that's not their norm, and that's not a problem. That must be really important. We don't want to look like punks and just cave over every little thing, because we got a set of precedents. We're going to want to walk that through. Contrast that to a client here the first week, and everything they have requested, they have done that. We're not doing that. You know what I mean? Because that's just going to open the door for the entire treatment episode of thinking that we have a bell on our neck and that whatnot. And if we're teaching independence, I just kind of think that's the wrong view. Does that make sense? How it works, Psychology Today shares how ABC and Ls can give practitioners, teacher, or therapists a great deal of insight into the behavior and helps to provide needed information regardless of how to manage that behavior. By observing each part of the model, professionals are able to gain the data necessary to do a functional assessment of the client situation. And the functional assessment is assessing kind of what motivates those behaviors, like we've been talking about. When they have this pertinent data, they can determine the cause or trigger the behavior and what to do to increase or decrease it. It's relatively easy to collect this data simply by writing down in detail what occurs prior to the behavior, then describing the behavior itself, and finally knowing in detail what happens afterwards. These steps to collect data should be taken each time the behavior occurs in order to look for patterns and tell what actions to change the behavior are working. And the actions will be the interventions. So like this one, the best example I could give is, say we have a client that misses 10:30 group only every day. Nothing else. They go to every other groups. They just missed that morning group. And we see for a week that they've missed it 5 consecutive times in a row. We have some probably insight based on our experience, what's causing that behavior. There could be a couple things going on. Maybe they just had a med change and they're sleeping in. Maybe I'm doing the group and then I'm not their favorite therapist, so they skip. Maybe someone in the group setting they used to run with or have a past bad relationship with, so they don't want to share their information. And because we don't know, if we just ignore, we know none of this. If we get with the client and we say, hey, what's going on? You missed 5 in a row. We have to put you on a behavioral support plan. Want to get through this? What's going on? Then we find out those things, and then we can work with it. You know what I'm saying? Then we can, if it's some kind of conflict of interest they have with another client, we can put them in a different group. You know what I mean? If they hate me as the counselor, they might have to get through that because that's the staffing we got, but we can put some things in place because it's not going to be like, you know, maybe I'm just not their favorite group facilitator. You know what I mean? If we can understand where it's coming from and unpack it and kind of see where it comes, we can put something in place around it. My favorite, if anybody's seen me do it, when we got one of those people always late and missing group, I love for 3 days giving the intervention where they have to go round up everybody for group. I think it's a good one. We kind of got to be on their ass a little bit to get them to do it, but when we design the interventions, they cannot be a negative consequence. They can't be a punishment like you can't go outside or you can't use the phone. That's not what this is. They have to be kind of designed to meet the behavior being exhibited. And if we're talking from the consequence angle, it's the consequence chain. It's not the desired effect they're showing, but not in a nasty way, like clean the bathroom with a toothbrush thing. You know what I'm saying? Something that hopefully would kind of allow some kind of insight and growth. Because I think all of us as human beings, when we're talking about personal growth, if we have something in our lives, something we're doing that maybe we're not even always aware of, we're not going to be able to change that unless we first acknowledge it. You know what I mean? So that's what this really is about, like keeping that scorecard, seeing where the problem areas, and then being like, hey, you got something to work on here. You know what I mean? So ABCs of behavior, that just in a nutshell, behaviors are motivated by internal thoughts that trigger an external environment that trigger stimulus. Behaviors are motivated by either trying to obtain a desired outcome or by trying to avoid something or someone may find unpleasant or not want to do. With the theory of ABCs of behavior, if we can identify what motivates the behavior, be it the A or the C, and change the A or C, the behavior itself can change. So our positive behavior intervention and support system, the behavioral support and recognition system was created for the facility for numerous reasons. First and foremost, the system is a way to create and maintain a safe environment for both staff and clients. The system was to create, acknowledge, recognize, and reinforce positive behaviors, but also to bring maladaptive actions and behaviors into the conscious awareness of clients, as well as to hold the clients responsible for these behaviors. I've been thinking about the levels of care a lot and the differences I see. I think on the higher levels, it really is about raising awareness and kind of treating maladaptive. In the lower levels, I'm seeing these guys, and I think it's going to be more about accountability here, because the clients are further along in their path and they've had time to stabilize, and maybe they're on medication for their mental health and it's been a long time since they used. And it really feels to me they just get away with the ones they can. And if you call them on it, they were so easily redirected. The first couple times I've had to do it, I was like, oh shit, because that same situation, an inpatient might lead to the police coming. You know what I mean? But here it's like, oh, I'm sorry, you know, it's okay, yeah, I'll fix it. You know what I mean? So not only is this a means to show the clients that all their actions have consequences, both positive and negative, but it also helps the clients to make better decisions based on the consequences of previous choice. Throughout the course of treatment, behavioral support plans are utilized to help modify behaviors. This consists of documentation of support indicators and therapeutic interventions. At its core, basic about observing and recording both positive pro-recovery behaviors and negative maladaptive ones not conducive to recovery in therapeutic environments. All staff and programs are expected to observe and report. And I'm talking anybody can give a support indicator, from medical to tech to anybody involved with our programs. It's the clinical team and the clinicians that actually work that out, though. Like, before it gets to a point, any like harder decisions have to be made. The counselor don't even need to wait for team. I mean, they got to see. Each program tracks a little bit different. Actually, no, Dansville and Olean are kind of the same. You guys both do it in a group teams. Inpatient does it on a paper check. You guys still do it like that with check marks on the clipboard? No one's listening? That hurts, guys. You hear me? Correct.
Yes, we are. I wasn't unmuted. Yes, we'll do it that way.
Either way, it doesn't matter how you keep the score. You're keeping the score. You know what I mean? It's the clinician, know they get 5 and they see that it's time for behavioral support plan. They get with the client, they get the plan, and they design an intervention the best. And they don't always have to be complex. I've given 300-word writing assignments, community apologies. I mean, be a little bit creative and just kind of see where it goes. You know what I mean? If you place too high demand, you might start something. So be fair with it, but there's nothing wrong with giving a therapeutic intervention designed to kind of meet what we're seeing. I lost my spot, I'm sorry. All staff and programs are expected to observe and report the noted behaviors as throughout the day we all interact. However, when problematic behavior occurs at a level of severity, frequency, or duration that calls for a therapeutic intervention, then it's the clinical team and primary clinician responsible for addressing that behavior and designing the interventions. For interventions designed by a clinician, it needs staff and community support, such as a written and verbal apology for something, while it's the clinician's responsibility to design the intervention, the staff are responsible for ensuring it gets done. So what I mean by that is, Tim, say Olin gives someone an intervention that in community meeting, this person is supposed to do a public apology. Once Olin don't do the community meeting, Tim, you might be doing it that day. So she's going to throw it out in teams. You're going to let her know it gets done. Is that fair assessment of what I'm talking about? Because I know we've done it and we've seen it. You guys know what I mean? So it's just like how we support each other. How the communication is everything with this too. It's everything that we all know and we all see what's going on. And again, from a perspective of just behavior, though, when you're dealing with these problematic ones. And then I think the follow through is also very important, and also timing. If someone needs a support plan, you can't wait till next week. It really should probably be done as soon as possible. If something pops off at night and either it's a level 2 or that got them to a 5, and the morning's the best. If the counselor's off, a supervisor doing it. I know Schuster does it a little different, doesn't she, Sierra? And I kind of like it. And it might, I don't know how you guys do it in Willow, but when they're new, Schuster does the plans always, because it was kind of like with the new clients, it was kind of causing some shit between them after their counselor and them. After they're kind of settled and used to the system, then she kind of just puts it on the count. Is it still like this here? All right. I think it's a good model. Inpatient, I'm not trying to be funny. They just ain't got time for all that. You know what I mean? They're only there 28 days and a lot of shit be happening. So yes, whatever counselor's off. If the client's counselor's off the next day, another counselor or supervisor, whoever can get to it first, kind of thing. The system is designed to treat maladaptive behaviors, but also affirm and recognize pro-recovery behaviors. So it's just as important. And I always like pointing that because we get so hung up on this. The positive recognition part of the system is just as equally as important, if not more. And I also, just because the client's kind of having some difficulties and maybe they got a support plan that week, if you see a pro behavior, you still should give that. There is no holding grudges. There is no like, this client is an asshole. You know what I mean? We can't think like that. We're looking at the person and we're looking at what they're doing and we're trying to be consistent across the board. And I always say, you don't want to overdo these, because if you give too much affirmation, this thing called satiation occurs where the reinforcer doesn't have the same effect because it's not as important anymore. I mean, like, you love pizza. If you ate pizza every day, twice a day, you wouldn't feel you loved it as much after a minute. Am I wrong? So it's a similar kind of thing. So you want to be careful not hand these out all the time. There can't be no quid pro quo with it. You can't be like, hey, do this extra thing and I'll give you a certificate. It has to be observed, natural, like no guided by a staff member. And I know in the programs, usually during team meeting, we will flush them out because we also don't want to give out 10 in a week. So we try to limit that maybe 2 or 3, you know what I mean? And they trade them in for whatever rewards the system, the program has determined they're worth. For the pro ones too, unlike the negative behaviors where they're very specific, these ones are pretty much more general, you know what I mean? So whatever you see that's kind of doing, I look at it like special needs. I used to give this example. Teaching a special needs child to tie their shoe, you were supposed to like reinforce even them brushing up against the shoelace, even if it looked accidental, because you're reinforcing just that kind of close approximation. So again, you don't want to get buck wild with it and just get a bunch them out. But if you see an honest effort at trying to do something for someone else or do something above and beyond, give out these certificates. You know what I mean? For maladaptive behavior or addictive behaviors not conducive to treatment, the PIV system works on a 3-tier system where the behaviors are operationally defined. An operational definition of behavior describes what the behavior or behaviors of interest look like in a way that is observable, measurable, and repeatable. A behavior of validity only enables observers to capture what the behavior is and what it is not. Our list of operational design behaviors is ongoing development, and we discover new behavior being exhibited regularly and has some motivation. We can also define behind it. We will then add it to our list, observe, and record and report. And especially some of y'all be working with me for a while. This is an ongoing thing, and we have edited so many times. And if something comes up we didn't think about, we will add it to the mix. But it also has to be, I mean, this isn't the catch-all, be-all. This isn't the thing that saves all lives. It's just a system that kind of helps us give good treatment. You know what I mean? And with that said, there will be behaviors that come up that are not on our list, but we're also not going to put them on our list because just this one person did it this one time doesn't mean it's something that we're going to see regularly and waste our, you know, you get what I'm saying you there? You know what I mean? Like if you've been working, if you have experience in this settings, you will know what I mean. Sometimes we are surprised, and that doesn't necessarily mean we're going to add it to our list, especially if it's a safety risk, because we're probably going to have to discharge the person. It's usually some crazy things when that happens. And that, again, but if we're seeing something reoccurring, something that everybody's doing, or just something that's popping up as a common theme and problem, we're going to get in front of that. We're going to add it to our list. So level 1 support indicators address issues that mostly deal with the program's day-to-day operation. It is important to remember that the list above is not all inclusive. If staff members find a client's action is not conducive to recover, they may assign the appropriate clinical intervention. Clients can explore whether PC WAGs rule exists and how they may relate to the social norms in the community. And I want to expand on that a little bit, because that's the one thing that I think that, and I think this is across settings personally, like I don't want to minimize where we're at, and I don't want to minimize our mission and our goals and the things that we need to deal with, because we're dealing with people at very lows in their life that kind of need a lot of support and a lot of understanding. So that's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying, this kind of illusion exists that in our settings, there still just isn't basic moral law and basic like societal expectation. I think that is inaccurate. I think it kind of sets a person up for failure when they leave here. And I think it's even a little stigmatizing, because I mean, while we might get some mental health and some cognitive delays on a quick occasion, our people are regularly functioning individuals that know right from wrong. And a lot of times when they're pushing that envelope, it's just because they feel they can. And I think it's important to show that that's not going to help them survive in life. And that's what this is kind of about. You know what I mean? So level one support indicators are most common, and so is tracking the target behavior. They are day-to-day things that contribute collectively to an overall therapeutic environment and are things when client is adhering to suggest progress. When they are not suggest, clients might need more support. And that's all this really is, because I think sometimes staff struggles with it. Level ones really mean nothing in themselves. I mean, even when clients get a little pissy about it, I will tell them I'd probably get 3 a week just for my swearing. You know what I'm saying? So it's not like that. It's when it's, if like every staff just started doing this rigidly, like all of a sudden, we would adjust that 5 to maybe 8. You know what I mean? But right now, 5 seems to hold well. So it's really just that number that says, hey, this is enough. I have a good kind of metaphor analogy. I fear saying it because sometimes people interpret it wrong, because in no way am I saying that like we are jail or prison. But I was describing this to, actually, I think Dave, the security guard, once, because he was a CO, is probably why I use the analogy. I have been a lot of places, and I have been in very high level institutions to very low ones. And because Dave was the CO for the jail, I know that he did transports to Elmira, and I've been to Elmira. And in Elmira, there's these yellow lines that inmates are supposed to walk within. And the time I was there, I never seen anything happen. I never seen an inmate step out of that line, but it was just known that if you did, the COs were going to be on your ass, and probably like some bad things were going to happen. So we are not Elmira, but those yellow lines is what I'm talking about. We have to create those kind of invisible yellow lines that are clear for a client to see. And no, we're not going to run up on bashing them, but nothing like that. But they have to be those lines in the sand that kind of, there's hard no's, and those go into level 2s and level 3s, and those jeopardize like safety of others and safety community and all that kind of thing. And to ignore those things is not a problem. However, what I'm trying to say is I believe when we kind of set those kind of invisible lines, you also just do not see that anymore. It prevents so much if we can do that. You know what I'm saying? And it takes a little setting up, but once you got it, you got it. As a way to think of it, we can give examples, but the examples would vary. So the one I will provide is more about a way to think of all this. So let's say within a week, a client flips out and refuses to do all things like chores, making beds, going to schedule appointments. That pattern would suggest just complete disregard and not compliance. Is that someone that we wish that we could work with? We probably do, but also that might not be that person's time, and that's okay. You know what I mean? That doesn't mean we're not going to get everyone from the door. We're going to try our asses off. That's why they get so many opportunities, but sometimes you got to call that. So then we see another thing within a week. I kind of already gave this example, but I'm gonna do it anyways. Within a week, a client adheres to all rules, behaves respectfully in ways that meets the expectations, but misfives the clinical group. It's kind of the example I gave earlier. This is, I already went over that one. So, but those are the kind of difference we're looking for and how behaviors can mean something different. And with that, I know usually the system is you do 2 support plans in a contract. That don't always mean discharge. Inpatient, it might because of the time frame. But in the residential programs, that can look a lot different because a client can come in hot and heavy, and we stay on them and we tell them, hey, this is not the expectation I'm supposed to do. We give them the interventions and the plan, and then they turn it around and they're doing great for 2 months, and then they just have a bad day. We are not going to throw that person out because it's their 3rd contract. You guys get what I'm saying there? It ain't that rigid with it. However, a client burns through those 3 contracts in 2 weeks. To me, that says something that, especially with knowing the staff variance with it and how different staff you would differently, and like all the amount of chances that went into that, client burns through that system in 2 weeks, that kind of says a lot. So level 2s and level 3s, a little more severe. Level 2s are typically automatic support plans or contracts. That's no, they don't need to be tallied. They don't need to be marked up. That's something that it's kind of a threat to safety. So think about like 2 clients get into an argument. And I mean, we see that, but I'm talking like a real argument. One of them might say, I'm going to fucking bust your ass or whatever, where there's a threat of violence to the thing. Nothing happened. They were easily redirected. We still got to show that that was a hard no on the flag. You can't walk around threatening other clients that you're going to hurt them. So they go right to the contract. You know what I mean? You guys get what I'm saying there? Now contrast that to where same argument and they throw like a chair at them or take a swing at them. That would be the level 3. The level 3 is the direct action. Level 2s get you another chance, maybe even 2. You know what I mean? Depending on what it is. Level 3 is usually that's something happened. the best way I get it, level threes are probably all those times the police have to come, or times that maybe the police didn't have to come, but it wouldn't hurt to call them. If it's like that, that is a level three. And 90% of the level threes, usually we got to like refer up or discharge. The 10% I give, because I know sometimes, and myself included, when you're in it and you're like, say you're the one that broke up that level two argument I talked about, that can feel really intense. And it can feel like a level three, but it's really, we review the tapes, we talk to some other people, it might just get bumped down to a contract. You guys know what I mean by that? So how it all works together, a weekly tally is taken by all direct staff for observing recording both positive recovery behavior and level one negative maladaptives not conducive to recovery in therapeutic environments. At the end of the week, tally is total, and the clinical staff put client on support plan in terms of intervention needed for any client who receives 5 level ones in a week, and the reinforcement reward for the positive pro-recovery behaviors. I got the support form. It is important to note that level ones during the week of the clients receive 3 support indicators. Everybody are familiar with this one. A clinician will meet with the client to complete the form. The form means nothing. The form is not a plan. The form isn't going to their tele. All the form is get with, if you see an opportunity to maybe give some tools and intervention, do so. Really, the form is about, hey, you're headed off a cliff. Here is a stop sign. You know what I'm saying? Like, we got 3 more days to this resets, 2 more, and you're going to be putting on a plan. We're trying to like avoid, what can we do to kind of help you avoid that? And by help avoid that, I don't mean cover up. I mean, like really help to avoid that and work through it in a better way. You know what I mean? There is no intervention needed for the form, although sometimes it may be helpful. It is more likely a stop sign to client and attempt to make them aware so they can improve that they are getting close to the 5 and need for support plan or contract. For level 2 support indicators, no tally or form needed, and these behaviors are more severe, but not severe enough to warrant discharge by client will automatically put on behavioral support plan or contract. I do want to note too, because sometimes I think it gets confusing. If a person's on a plan for 5 level ones and they get a level 2, they're not separate things. The actual amount kind of go together. And then we're looking at as a clinical team on how often this is happening, how severe it is, how does it impact everybody else in the program? You know what I mean? And staff included. Because I mean, I think all of you know me at this point. I mean, staff safety is very important to me, and like psychologically safety too. We have to feel like kind of secure in our jobs and confident in what we're doing to kind of bring that creative element that kind of makes the magic happen. So with that said, like we have to have thick skin. Clients are going to tell us to F ourselves. Clients are going to call us pieces of shit. Clients are going to tell us that we suck, even though we know we just busted our ass for like 3 days in a row trying to get this referral done to this amazing place for them. They're going to tell us that we suck. And we got to take all that with a grain of salt. And that's okay. You know what I mean? Because that's just what it is. You can't take it personally. You know what I mean? For
I've
level 3,
also found one thing that helps too with this is when you do meet with a client to discuss that, they realize that we all talk. You know what I mean?
yes,
Communicate with each other. So
yes.
and that helps too.
Thank you, Olin, because I agree with that one. For this to work is on program level. I got blood just because inpatient I have the most experience. We know Monday through Friday when we're like fully clinical staffed and we got 3 counselors on and 2 case managers and techs and everybody's there. It can be different on an evening shift when we only have 2 staff, 2 support, like front end staff and a counselor. Around the weekends, the clients may show a different side of themselves. So what Owen was just saying is basically the way we use Teams to communicate, which I think we all do pretty good here. I think it's almost critical, if not very wise, if something happens on the evening or weekend stuff for the day clinical staff to show that they are aware, to show that they know what happened, they know exactly what happened, and that we're all talking all the time. Anybody, Melissa, I see you shaking your head. You agree with that? No, it helps because then it shows it doesn't matter. It does because, I mean, I think program directors can vouch for that, and me myself. Clients are going to present me different. I'm the principal, man. I'm the one that like they want to show their best self for, and they're just angels and they're perfect. You know what I mean? Like that's usually what I'm going to get. Unless I'm helping out with a crisis situation, that's how it's going to be presented to me. And while I fundamentally believe they're all angels at the core, I know a big part of that is an act. You know what I'm saying? So I pay attention more to the count and the team's messages. All right, so the level 3s already went over. That's kind of like the most severe cases, and really we call them something and they're part of the system, but 90% of that time, client probably has to go, maybe not to the streets, but somewhere else that can kind of meet their needs. All right, so how it all works, last slide, the system must be delivered consistently and for clients in a way that staff shows they are united with it and fair. That part is so important because if we got us a little charmer here and they're getting away with murder, the other clients are gonna see that. And when you try to put this kind of stuff on them, they're gonna be like, what's that about? Why does this person get that off? And you're still gonna get that from time to time, but if it's not accurate and we're being across the board, it's much less and much less umph behind it if someone's making a claim. At its basic form, where it all leads in relation to negative behavior, if the client obtains 2 behavioral support plans and a treatment contract, and then once exhibits the problematic behavior, that is grounds for discharge and referral to a higher level of care. And again, we're trying to refer to a higher level in all cases, and especially now, except for a psych ward, we have all levels in-house. So someone's messing up, it's supportive, we can move them back a step. If they continue, we can move them back a step again if needed. That's not nothing we're gonna make decisions we ain't gonna make lightly. We're looking at the whole progress, but that is nice. And I've been preaching it like I have a dream. We are one system here now. You know what I mean? So I say grounds for, and in most cases maybe, but it's the final decision of the clinical team to make that call. Although it's a pretty good system, it's not perfect. What I mean is the client burns through the system in 3 chances within a few weeks is a pretty good indicator they're not in the right program. I gave this example earlier. If they get 2 and then do well for a while and turn it around, then all of a sudden have a bad day, that's not necessarily something we're going to throw out for. You know what I mean? But I do think it's about being honest, being across the board, being consistent, and just calling things for what they are too. You know what I mean? Because I think sometimes we all have favorites. You know, we all have, might not want to admit it, but we got ones that we kind of like have a better rapport with and I relate. And I don't really work with clients much more, but there are people I am across the board, and even the ones I like know it. And there might be 1 or 2 my heart goes out to, but believe that they push that line, they're going through the system. And that's
Can
it.
I just add something on that I've found while we've worked and tweaked and made this what it is? One thing that like a lot of the times clients we don't have to tell them right when we give them a level 1 infraction, right?
Yeah.
So they get these level 1 infractions, they meet with their counselor or whatever, do their behavior support plan for, say they have 3, so they do that form, and then next thing you know, they're questioning, well, who gave me the infraction? Who did that? Who did that?
Yeah.
I think it's very important for us to remember that, like, we're all a team. So, like, regardless of who gave the infraction, maybe like not be like, oh, well, Melissa gave you that infraction, more so like, well, it doesn't matter. The point is that you have it. We're going to move past that. Cause I think that's another thing is people are quick to.
Yeah. And I think that's a good first line too, because I agree with you. I see it so often and it's like, I was actually thinking about this, so I'm glad you brought it up because I think I have an idea, but I'm gonna have to write it to a policy. First, I want to say we got to listen to that stuff because sometimes we're humans and we make mistakes. But Melissa's right. We don't just automatically jump. Oh, you say you were in group and Melissa's a liar and kind of give that we feed that because that's not going to help the situation. You know what I mean? On the real, especially. I like it when I see it when it's like 7 and they're arguing over 1. Just give it to them. I don't give a shit. Take 2 off if you want. They're still getting on a contract. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't matter. But the way I was thinking about that, Melissa, because we do see it often, and you don't want to. Sometimes there's been mistakes. I've seen staff that mark an absent one and it was the wrong client. Like it does happen. So you don't want to just throw your hands up and listen. So you got to take the whole picture. But you're right. You don't want to throw each other on the bus. We need to support and be united in this thing. The policy I was thinking about is maybe making something though, because not for all things, but most things, you guys all know I will check tapes. I don't like to. I don't like fucking sitting there and watching fucking videos for 2 hours, but I'll do it if I need to. You know what I mean? So I'm thinking about making some kind of policy if there's a challenge to it. And again, if it's something we know we can verify, I'll check the tapes. However, if they find out to be they're like bullshit, and then it's another one for staff splitting. But I'd have to write that up. You know what I'm saying? And give them that option before it. Oh, you're saying that Melissa was wrong? That's cool. Hey, well, I checked the tapes. But just so you know, if it's found on the tapes that is accurate, they're also, and it's only a level 1, but still, you know what I mean? Something.
Can I say something too?
Mm-hmm.
I think kind of what Melissa was saying, like, from our end of it as a team, like not even opening that door up to pinpoint 1 staff member, keeping it as, the
United.
team,
Yeah,
the
that
team
part's
gave
definite. I'm sorry if I took away from what you. I agree with you. Even if it's true and we find out and we're gonna fix that, just like me and my wife need to, like, even if we don't agree, we need to show that we're on, like, it's the same thing. To feed into that kind of drama, you're already out of bounds. And again, they are right sometimes. So we need to listen and we need to double check if there is a claim. We need to, but also not to show that, because being the person that has been the one to watch those hours and hours of videos, more times than not, the client's lying. And that's just what it is. You know what I'm saying? And I don't want to jump to the conclusion or lie in all cases, because also sometimes they're not, and we make mistakes too. You know what I mean? And we don't want to be giving people contracts that don't deserve it. But again, I hate to generalize, but usually the clients that challenge it are the same ones that like 7, 8 in a week. And I also think in that case, don't be like, okay, and take the one off. You know what I mean? Like, who cares? You're still on it. You know what I mean?
I was trying to bring up like a good mix of both. Like, I definitely feel like staying united also, but I was also kind of playing off the fact that you brought up consistency. I feel like that's a struggle sometimes.
Yeah, definitely.
We're really, really good, and then we're really, really bad at it.
Flat. And it's because I think that's it. We all know it's not the end all be all, but I mean, anybody that's seen it, I mean, I'm sorry, I'm ready to pull. I've seen the data. I've seen it. We had a unique situation at inpatient where we went hard with it and then it was removed suddenly for a period of time. And I'm telling y'all, numbers went in the Mohawken toilet. You know what I'm saying? So there is something to this with retention and successful completion rates, because like it went from, and when it came back within a month, it went from like 30% success rates back up to like 60% success rates. And I'm sorry that there's more to it. It's not just that. I mean, there's structure involved and there's the consistency part involved, but that's a powerful, I mean, if I put it together in a research article, that shit is statistically significant and will be an evidence base. I'm just saying, you know what I mean?
If you do an article, you should also talk about the reduction in stress for us.
Yeah.
Because that's a real thing too. When that system is working, it just works on its own. And you talked about the client who's like schmoozing people. Well, they keep each other in check too, because if they know the rule, they also pass it down. So
it becomes norms. It becomes like societal, just like we know proper behavior at the grocery mart. It's what, and there's nothing wrong with setting that. But I mean, of course, we have to be therapeutic. We have to see within the gray areas at times, but holistically, it's a way of being. And thank you, Jennifer, because that is my primary goal, to make it so we can breathe. With that said, too, I mean, supervisors, you guys are on it. Schuster already knows it. She had something else to do, but that's kind of the supervisor's job too, because again, with us being human, sometimes I'll have a staff member that's a little too gung-ho, and I might have to get with them and be like, turn that down. Because I am big on this too. Like, you cannot be a Gestapo. We're not running around. No one's getting a bonus for getting more infractions marked. Like, that's not happening. You know what I'm saying? But so the real thing is, though, we don't look away. We don't ignore. We don't pretend it didn't happen. You know what I'm saying? We recognize it for what it is and we deal with it. That is the goal. We're not hawking them down trying to catch everyone, because they are grown and we're trying to teach them skills. You know what I mean? And then on the flip side of it, I think sometimes staff feels like a level 1 infraction means they got the client in trouble. And I don't know, because no one said it to me, but I imagine they're like, oh my God, I have to put my initials on that. If that client finds out, they're gonna yell at me. It could happen. We're going to back you though. We're going to stand behind you on that. You know what I mean? So
when I first started here, that is some of the feeling I got at first when we first started using the system was, oh, I'm getting this client in trouble. But through my own experience, I mean, like what Jennifer and Melissa said, it really does help with just the unity and the stress level and all that stuff for us here, and helps the clients to grow and change these behaviors, shows them the way.
And that part, and if anybody wants to co-sign this when I'm done, feel free. But that's the part I think we need to get past, because really, if this is in place, what I see is we might think that and we might fear that, and that you're going to piss them off and you might lose them. But really, us discharging people off of this doesn't happen as frequently as much as you would think. What happens probably much more so is the fact that they start getting better and they start doing, and not perfect. I mean, that's why they go on to 820s. You know, we just at inpatient, we just got to get them good enough so they can function in 820. 820 is just about getting them good enough so they can have some independent skills in a halfway house. You know what I mean? I'm talking big picture kind of thing. I know it don't always work like that, but you know what I'm saying? Each one of us kind of has our main goals. You know what I mean? So yeah.
I'd also like to add that, like, it also doesn't just, I think it does wonderful things for us. I agree with Jennifer and I agree with Melissa, but it also lets the clients know that we see them. Like, not so much all of the bad things, like even some of the good stuff. So like you said, like if they do really, really well and then all of a sudden, boom, they're doing really, really poor. And we call them out on that in like a nice way, like, hey, I saw you got an infraction yesterday, or I noticed you didn't come through. Oh, okay. I'm jumping. I just think it's great because they're like, wow, you see me. I had this happen to me last week where a client was like, why are you asking? And I'm like, I'm just making sure you're okay. Jennifer was standing right next to me.
And you're making me think, because I haven't really talked about this stuff in a while. I also believe in that part of it. We might have a client that's been with us for a while, doing great, and then all of a sudden they got like 7 infractions in a day. A counselor needs to get with that person because something's going on. That person could have someone in the hospital, someone might have died, like there might be something triggering the shit out of that, you know what I mean? So that's another good thing about it too. All right, we're almost out of time. Anybody got any questions? You know, there's one's going in the system. I'm kicking myself for not making it sooner. You know what I mean? So are we good? All right. I will see all y'all soon.